The paper was shaking. No. My hands were shaking. The paper was perfectly still, the letters printed in clean black ink, clinical, indifferent to the fact that they had just detonated my entire life. Blood type incompatibility. Biological relation, excluded. I read it 3 times. Then a 4th. Like somehow the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Something that didn't make me want to put my fist through the wall. My daughter was 5 years old. She had my wife's eyes and my laugh, everyone said so. She called me Appa and fell asleep on my chest during thunderstorms because she said my heartbeat made her feel safe. And according to this single sheet of paper, she wasn't mine. I should tell you who I am. What I do. But you've probably already guessed. My name is Kong Min-jae. I run the most powerful organization in Busan. Men twice my age bow when I enter a room. I've buried people for less than a sideways glance. I've built an empire on one principle and one principle only: loyalty is everything. Betray the family, and there is no hole deep enough to hide in. That principle made me rich. Made me feared. Made me untouchable. And now it was about to make me destroy everything I loved. Before I tell you what happened next, and trust me, you're going to want to hear every word of this, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Tell us where you're watching from. We tell stories like this every week. Stories about betrayal, impossible choices, and the moments that break you or make you. Now let's get back to it. My driver, Dae-young, was waiting by the car. He saw my face and immediately straightened. Didn't ask questions. Smart man. Home, I said. My voice sounded wrong. Hollow. Yes, boss. I got in the back seat and stared at the paper again. We'd been at the hospital because Soo-min, my daughter, had needed minor surgery. A tonsillectomy. Routine, the doctor said. Nothing to worry about. They'd run blood work as standard procedure. And then the doctor had pulled me aside with a look I'd seen before. The look people get when they have to tell me something they know I won't want to hear. Usually, that look precedes begging. But this doctor didn't beg. He just handed me a folder and said, "Mr. Kong, there's an irregularity I need to discuss with you." An irregularity. Like my entire existence hadn't just cracked down the middle. Soo-min was still in recovery when I left. My wife, Hae-won, was with her. I told them I had business to handle. Urgent. I'd be back in an hour. That was a lie. I didn't know when I'd be back. I didn't know if I could look at either of them without seeing something I couldn't unsee. The city blurred past the window. Neon signs. Street vendors. Kids on their phones. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that somewhere in a black sedan, a man who controlled half the ports in this city was falling apart. I pulled out my phone. Scrolled to a contact. My finger hovered. Park Joon-ho. My best friend. My second in command. The man who had stood beside me through the gang wars of '09, through the police raids, through the funerals of men we'd loved like brothers. Joon-ho was the only person on this earth I trusted completely. I had held his firstborn son. He had held Soo-min the day she was born. I needed to talk to him. I needed someone to tell me this was a mistake. A lab error. Something. But I didn't call. Something in my gut stopped me. A whisper I couldn't quite hear yet. That whisper would become a scream soon enough. I didn't go back to the hospital. I went home. Our home, a modern fortress in the hills above the city, all glass and steel and security systems that could detect a fly landing on the perimeter. My wife and I had built this place together. Every room held a memory. The kitchen where Hae-won taught Soo-min to make kimchi jjigae. The living room where we watched movies every Sunday. The bedroom where. I stopped that thought cold. In my office, I poured a glass of soju and didn't drink it. Just stared at it. The liquid caught the lamplight. I imagined it was blood. Whose blood? The question kept looping. If Soo-min wasn't mine, whose was she? My wife and I had been married for 7 years when Soo-min was born. We tried for 2 years before that. Doctors said it might not happen. We'd almost given up. And then, a miracle, Haewon had called it. A gift. Some gift. I thought about the timeline. The math. 6 years ago, Haewon got pregnant. 9 months later, Soo-min arrived. Which meant the conception happened sometime in late spring. What was happening in late spring 6 years ago? I pulled out my laptop. Started going through old calendars, old photos, old messages. A man in my position keeps records of everything. I'd always thought it was paranoia. Now I was grateful for it. And then I found it. Late April, 6 years ago. I was in Seoul for 3 weeks. A turf negotiation with the North Side families that had gotten bloody. I'd left Junho behind to manage operations in Busan. To keep my wife company. To make sure she was safe while I was gone. 3 weeks. I closed the laptop slowly. The soju glass shattered in my hand before I even realized I'd crushed it. Blood ran down my palm, mixing with the alcohol, dripping onto the mahogany desk. I didn't feel it. All I could feel was the fire building behind my ribs. I heard the front door open around midnight. Haewon's heels on the marble. She was talking to one of the housekeepers about Soo-min's medications, her voice light, unworried. She had no idea. Or maybe she had every idea and had just been waiting 6 years for this moment. I stayed in my office until the house went quiet. Then I walked upstairs to our bedroom. She was in bed, reading something on her tablet, looking exactly like the woman I'd loved since I was 22 years old. Beautiful. Poised. The only person who had ever seen me cry. She looked up when I entered. Smiled. Hey. I was worried about you. Is everything? Who is he? The smile died on her face. I watched it happen in slow motion. The confusion first, then the flicker of recognition, then the blood draining from her cheeks. What? Soo-min's father. I stepped closer. My voice was calm. Too calm. Who is he? Min-jae, what are you talking about? You're her. Don't. That single word came out like a blade. She flinched. In 12 years of marriage, I had never raised my voice to her. Never given her a reason to fear me. But she was afraid now. I could see it. Good. The hospital ran blood work. There was a discrepancy. I pulled the crumpled paper from my pocket and tossed it onto the bed. So I'll ask you one more time. And Haewon, I will know if you're lying. Who is Soo-min's biological father? She stared at the paper. Didn't pick it up. Didn't need to. She already knew what it said. The silence stretched. 10 seconds. 20. An eternity. And then she started crying. I've watched men die. I've watched them beg. I've heard every lie the human mouth can produce. But nothing prepared me for the sound of my wife sobbing while she whispered a name I never expected to hear. Junho. The room tilted. It was Junho. She told me everything. Maybe because she knew lying was pointless. Maybe because she'd been carrying this weight for 6 years and was relieved to finally set it down. I don't know. I stopped trying to understand her the moment his name left her lips. It happened during those 3 weeks I was in Seoul. Junho came by to check on her, just like I'd asked him to. They had dinner. Talked. She was lonely. I was always gone. He was there. It wasn't planned, she kept saying, like that made it better. It just happened. One time. One stupid, horrible time. And then we both swore it would never happen again. One time, I repeated. I know you don't believe me, but one time was enough to get pregnant. She had no answer for that. The affair, if you could call one night an affair, ended immediately. Junho felt so guilty he almost confessed to me himself, but she convinced him not to. She didn't know she was pregnant yet. When she found out weeks later, she convinced herself the baby was mine. The timing was close enough. She convinced Junho of the same. He doesn't know, she said. I swear to you, Min-jae, Junho doesn't know Su-min might be his. I never told him. I never even let myself consider it. But you suspected. Another silence. Then a nod. How long? Since she was 2, she whispered. There's this thing she does with her hands when she's thinking. This gesture. Junho does the same thing. I noticed it one day and I knew. For years. My wife had suspected for 4 years and said nothing. I walked out of the bedroom without another word. I didn't trust myself to stay in that room. Because if I stayed, I was going to do something I couldn't take back. The man I trusted with my life had slept with my wife. My daughter wasn't my daughter. And everyone had known but me. I went downstairs, grabbed a bottle from the bar, and drank until the sun came up. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. By dawn, I was showered, dressed, and sitting in my car outside our main operations building, a legitimate shipping company on the surface, something much darker underneath. The men who saw me that morning knew immediately that something was wrong. They didn't ask. They just moved faster, spoke quieter, avoided eye contact. Smart. Junho arrived at 9, same as always. I watched him from my office window, walking through the parking lot, coffee in hand, phone pressed to his ear, laughing at something someone said. He looked so normal. So innocent. Like he hadn't been carrying a secret for 6 years that would destroy us both. My hand went to the gun in my desk drawer. Standard procedure. I'd killed men for far less than this. My own code demanded it. Betrayal was betrayal. There were no exceptions. But I didn't pull the weapon. Because Su-min's face flashed through my mind. That smile. Those eyes. The way she said appa like it was the most important word in any language. If I killed Junho, what did that make me? What kind of father murders a man and calls it justice? But if I didn't, what did that make me in the eyes of my men? A fool? A cuckold? Weak? There's no rulebook for this. Trust me. I've written most of the rules in this city, and none of them covered what I was feeling. Junho walked into my office at 10. Usual routine. Daily briefing on operations, collections, any problems that needed my attention. He sat across from my desk, opened his notebook, and started talking about a shipment delay at the docks. I let him talk for 3 minutes. Watched his hands. The same hands my wife had described. Finally, I interrupted. Tell me about April, 6 years ago. He stopped mid-sentence. April? Which April? The one when I was in Seoul. For the Kim negotiation. You stayed behind. Something changed in his face. Subtle. Most people wouldn't have caught it. But I've spent 30 years reading men's faces, and I saw the exact moment the blood left his cheeks. That was, a long time ago, boss. It was. So let me help you remember. I leaned forward. You were checking in on Haewon. Making sure she was safe. Keeping her company. Right. Yeah. Standard stuff. Is that what you call it? Silence. Junho put down his notebook. He was smart enough to know where this was going. We'd known each other too long for pretense. Min-jae. Don't. I held up my hand. Don't say my name like we're still brothers. Don't pretend you don't know why I'm asking. His eyes dropped to the desk. The gun drawer. He knew what was in there. He'd helped me use it more than once. I never wanted to lie to you, he said quietly. And yet here we are. It was one night. One mistake. I've lived with the guilt every day since. I would have told you 1,000 times if I thought. If you thought what? That I wouldn't kill you. I laughed, and it didn't sound like a laugh. It sounded like breaking glass. That's exactly why you didn't tell me. Because you knew exactly what I'd do. What I should do. What every man in this building would expect me to do. Junho looked up at me. His eyes were wet. This was a man who had stabbed rivals and not flinched. And now he was crying. She never told me, he said. About Su-min. I swear on my life. I never knew. And if you had known? He didn't answer. Couldn't. I told him to leave. To go home and stay there until I decided what to do. He didn't argue. Just stood up, nodded once, and walked out like a man walking to his own execution. Maybe he was. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I delegated everything. Cancelled meetings. Told my men I needed time to handle a personal matter. They didn't ask questions. Good. That evening, I drove back to the hospital to pick up Su-min. She'd been discharged, cleared for rest at home. My wife had brought her to my mother-in-law's house, probably too afraid to come home herself. When I walked through the door, Su-min ran straight into my arms. Appa. I caught her. Lifted her up. She wrapped her arms around my neck and squeezed tight, and for one moment, one perfect moment, nothing else existed. Not the betrayal. Not the blood test. Not the rage still simmering in my chest. Just her. I missed you, she said into my shoulder. Where did you go? I had work, baby. Important work. More important than me. I held her tighter. Nothing is more important than you. You hear me? Nothing. She giggled, not understanding the weight behind those words. Then she pulled back and looked at me with those big eyes, Haewon's eyes, I used to think, but maybe not anymore, and said. Appa, will you read me a story tonight? I looked at her face. Studied it like I was seeing her for the first time. Tried to see Junho in her features. The slope of her nose. The shape of her chin. And you know what? Maybe it was there. Maybe there was something I'd been too blind to notice. But it didn't matter. Because when I looked at her, all I saw was my daughter. The girl I'd held when she was born. The girl I'd sung to sleep 1,000 nights. The girl who had softened every hard edge of a man who made his living through violence. DNA didn't make me her father. I did. Word travels fast in my world. By the third day, people were starting to talk. I could feel it, the whispers, the sideways glances, the questions nobody dared ask out loud. Junho had been absent from operations. I'd been absent mentally. Something was clearly wrong at the top, and in this business, weakness invites wolves. My underboss, Shin Tae-wook, pulled me aside on day 4. Boss, I need to ask. Is there something I should know? Tae-wook was old school. Loyal. But even loyalty has limits when power is on the line. Nothing that concerns you, I said. With respect, everything that affects the organization concerns me. Junho hasn't been seen in days. There are rumors. What rumors? He hesitated. Tae-wook wasn't a man who hesitated. That he's done something unforgivable. That you're deciding whether to handle it quietly or, publicly. I stared at him. Said nothing. If it's true, he continued carefully, the men need to see justice. You know how this works. You wrote the rules yourself. Betrayal cannot stand. He was right. By every standard I'd ever set, Junho should already be dead. My wife should be cast out. The child. I couldn't finish that thought. Give me time, I said. How much time? As much as I need. He nodded, but I saw the doubt in his eyes. The wolves were circling. On the 6th night, I went to Junho's apartment. Alone. No driver. No backup. Just me and the gun I'd been carrying every day since I found out. He opened the door looking like he hadn't slept in a week. Probably hadn't. Neither had I. Min-jae. I walked past him without a word. Sat down on his couch. He closed the door slowly, like he was sealing his own fate, and sat across from me. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, I said, I've been trying to figure out how to hate you. He didn't respond. 22 years, Junho. That's how long we've known each other. You were the best man at my wedding. You held my daughter, the day she was born. You looked me in the eye and smiled while holding the proof of your betrayal. I know. Do you? Because I've spent every hour of the last 6 days imagining ways to make you suffer. I've thought about what I'd do to anyone else who betrayed me like this. You know what I'd do. Yes. So why shouldn't I do it to you? He took a deep breath. Let it out slowly. Because you're not the man you think you are. I almost laughed. Excuse me. I've watched you for 2 decades, Min-jae. I've seen you do terrible things. I've helped you do terrible things. But I've also seen you with Su-min. The way you are with her, that's the real you. Not this. He gestured vaguely at the world. Not the empire. Not the fear and the power. Her. That's who you actually are. You don't get to tell me who I am. Maybe not. But I can tell you this, killing me won't change anything. Su-min will still be the girl you raised. She'll still love you. She'll still call you Appa. Nothing I did can take that from you, unless you let it. I sat with those words. Turned them over in my mind like stones. And what about the organization? I asked. You know the rules. You helped me write them. If I show mercy, I show weakness. And weakness gets people killed. Junho nodded slowly. Then maybe some rules need to change. I didn't kill him that night. Didn't even draw the gun. I just sat there for an hour, then stood up and left. On the drive home, I thought about my father. The man I barely remembered, beaten to death in an alley over a debt he couldn't pay. I was 12. Watched the whole thing from behind a dumpster. Too weak to help. Too scared to move. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would never be weak again. I would build something so powerful that no one could ever touch me or anyone I loved. And I had done it. Built an empire on fear and blood and an iron code that demanded justice for every betrayal. But now, staring down the barrel of my own rules, I realized something I'd never admitted before. Fear is not strength. Control is not power. And loyalty, real loyalty, isn't about blood. It's about choice. It's about showing up every day and deciding that someone matters more than your pride. Junho had betrayed me. Haewon had betrayed me. But Su-min? Su-min was innocent. She hadn't asked to be born this way. She didn't know any of this. To her, I was simply Appa, the man who made her feel safe. Was I really going to destroy that because of a piece of paper? The next morning, I called a meeting. Every captain, every lieutenant, every man who mattered. The room was packed. The tension was suffocating. Everyone knew something was about to happen. I stood at the head of the table. Junho sat to my right, alive, unharmed, present. The whispers stopped the moment I started speaking. You've heard rumors, I said. Some of them are true. There was a betrayal. A serious one. By someone at this table. Eyes darted to Junho. He stared straight ahead. By the rules I've enforced for 20 years, there should be a body in the harbor by now. Some of you are wondering why there isn't. Some of you think I've gone soft. I paused. Let the silence stretch. Here's what I've realized. The rules I wrote were designed to protect us. But they were also designed by a man who was afraid. Afraid of weakness. Afraid of being the boy who watched his father die and couldn't do anything about it. I looked around the room. Saw confusion, surprise, respect in different faces. I'm not that boy anymore. And I'm not afraid of looking weak, because I've spent my entire life proving I'm not. So here's what's going to happen. Junho has been removed from his position as second in command. He will remain part of this organization, but in a reduced role. This is my decision. If anyone disagrees, you can take it up with me. Personally. No one spoke. No one moved. What matters now is that we continue to operate as a family. A real family, not one built on fear, but on something stronger. Are we clear? Slow nods around the room. One by one. The wolves had expected blood. Instead, they got a king rewriting his own laws. And none of them dared challenge it. That evening, I went home for the first time since the confrontation with my wife. She was in the kitchen, cooking something that smelled like home, pretending everything was normal. It wasn't. We need to talk, I said. She turned off the stove. Sat down across from me at the table. Her hands were shaking. So were mine. I'm not going to pretend I've forgiven you, I said. I don't know if I ever will. What you and Junho did, it broke something in me that might never heal. She nodded. Tears already streaming. But I've made a decision. About us. About Sumin. About what kind of man I want to be going forward. What decision? I took a breath. The hardest breath of my life. I'm not leaving. And I'm not sending you away. We're going to try, for her sake. Sumin deserves two parents who can at least be in the same room without destroying each other. Can you do that? Yes, she whispered. Minjae, yes. I'll do whatever it takes. Good. Because here's my condition, Sumin never finds out. Not from you, not from Junho, not from anyone. As far as she's ever concerned, I'm her father. The only father she's ever had. The only one she needs. Of course. I mean it, hey one. If she ever learns the truth, it has to come from me. When I decide she's ready. If I ever decide she's ready. Understood? I understand. I stood up. Started to walk away. Then turned back. One more thing. I don't hate you. I want to, God, I want to. But I look at our daughter, and all I see is everything good we ever made together. Whatever you did, whatever happened, that girl is proof that something between us was real. And I won't let your mistake erase that. She broke down completely then. Sobbing into her hands. I didn't comfort her. That would come later, maybe, if ever. But at least it would come. 6 months later, things are different. Not perfect, never perfect, but different. Junho runs a small operation on the outskirts of the city. We don't talk much, but when we do, it's civil. Maybe one day it'll be more than that. Maybe not. Some wounds don't close, they just stop bleeding. Haewon and I are trying. We sleep in the same bed but don't touch. We eat dinner as a family but don't say much. We're learning to coexist, two people who once loved each other deeply now navigating the wreckage of what's left. But Sumin? Sumin is everything. She turned 6 last month. We threw her a party, balloons, cake, a ridiculous princess theme she insisted on. She blew out the candles and made a wish she wouldn't tell anyone, and when she looked up at me with frosting on her nose, I realized something. She was my miracle. Not because she was born from me, but because she made me into someone worth being. I've killed men. I've built an empire on blood and fear. I've done things that would make most people sick. But this girl sees none of that. She sees Appa. The man who reads her stories and checks for monsters under the bed. The man who will burn the world down for her and let the whole world burn if that's what it takes to keep her safe. Biology didn't make me her father. Love did. And no blood test, no betrayal, no secret from the past will ever change that. Last night, Sumin climbed into my lap while I was working in my office. It was past her bedtime, and she should have been asleep, but she'd had a nightmare. Appa, she said, I had a bad dream. What about? I dreamed you weren't my daddy anymore. My heart stopped. That's impossible, I said, pulling her close. You know why? Why? Because being a daddy isn't about where you come from. It's about who shows up. Who stays. Who fights the monsters, even the ones you can't see. And I will always, always show up for you. Understand? She nodded, her little face pressed against my chest. I love you, Appa. I love you too, baby. More than anything in this world. She fell asleep in my arms. I carried her back to bed. Tucked her in. Watched her breathe for a long time. And then I went back to my office, sat down at my desk, and cried for the first time in 30 years. Because the truth is this, I built my empire on loyalty. On blood. On never showing weakness to anyone. But my daughter taught me that the strongest thing a man can do isn't kill his enemies. It's choose love when everything inside him is screaming for revenge. And that choice is what made me her father. Not blood. Not a test. Just me showing up, every single day, and deciding she's mine. That's what being a father means. And I'll be damned if a piece of paper ever changes that.